Hello, friends. At the beginning of COVID and all of its lockdowns, I began a discipline of producing a midweek devotion and put that discipline on pause when some of those restrictions were lifted. But now that we find ourselves in lockdown again, I'm starting up again this discipline of producing a midweek devotion. And so for the next few weeks, I pray, join me for this time of devotion. This week, I want to focus our thoughts and our minds on a word that I came across in some of my readings. It's the word etzer. Maybe it's not a word that you've heard of before. It's a Hebrew word, not very common. I came across that word when I was reading the document on the theological study for human sexuality, that report that we referenced in church on Sunday. In the book of Genesis, when God sees his good creation, he looks at this world and he looks at Adam, his first creation made in his image, and he finds no suitable helper. And there's the word in Hebrew is the word etzer. No suitable helper was found for him. Oftentimes we associate this idea of the relationship between man and woman as being as having kind of a hierarchy, but that's not true. That word etzer is actually used in reference to God. We find it in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12, actually, when the people of Israel were invaded by Babylon, and the people of Israel repelled the people of Babylon through the help of God. Samuel and the people of Israel erect a stone, a monument. That stone and that monument is given a name. It's given the name Ebenezer. We sing about that, and we use that word in one of our favorite hymns. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. And then in that second verse, we sing the lyric, here I raise my Ebenezer. And some of us come across that phrase and we go, well, what does that mean? Here I raise my Ebenezer. Hither by thy help I've come. That word, talking about God as the rock of help or the stone of help. That God is the one who carries us even in difficult times. The stone that Samuel erected was a constant reminder to the people of Israel that God had protected them and led them to victory. God was their helper. In other words, and the Ebenezer was a visual reminder, that rock of help, that monument was a reminder of that truth. Whenever the people of Israel walked past that stone, they would remember God's kindness to them and praise them for it. As we hear that story and as we hear that word in the context of that story, we might wonder to ourselves, why didn't God stop the people of the Philistine people from actually invading? And of course, that's a question that we might struggle with, and we might wonder why God doesn't stop us from experiencing difficult circumstances. But what we are assured of in that story is that in the midst of the difficult circumstances that we face, God is the rock of help. He is our rock of help. Here I raise my Ebenezer. Hither by thy help I've come. He was acknowledging, or Samuel is acknowledging, that God had directed his life, that God had provided for him. He was proclaiming that God is our help, just as he was for the people of Israel so many centuries, so many millennia ago. I want you to think at the beginning of this new year, how God has or is your Ebenezer, your rock of strength or your rock of help. I remember so many moments in my life where I can see that God was my helper, that he was my rock of help. My wife and I celebrate the protection that he's given to us and the health of our children. We remind ourselves continually about the provisions that God has given to us in not only our family, but the provision that God has given to us in his church. That too is a way that God shows that he is our Eben Etzer, our rock, our helper. At the beginning of a new year again, we sit around with our families and we tell each other stories of how God has been with us. And this year has indeed been hard for many. Maybe for some of you, it's been a very good year. But in the midst of that, all of us have stories of God's faithfulness. Stories of how God has been our stone of help, our Ebenezer. And so we'll close this time off, and I usually close this time off with the words of the blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine on you. May he lift up his face upon you and give you his strength. Amen.